Salaried, exempt, employees have to punch a time card now? Okay. It would sure be a shame if someone notified the labor board about your illegal PTO practices, though. A few years ago I was employed by a relatively small but publicly traded company. I virtually guarantee you wouldn't recognize the name if you weren't in their specific little corner of industry. Well, this place went public and decided to use some of the money to purchase an even smaller company, and suddenly we were in the DoD contracting business. As you may or may not know, the U.S. Department of Defense places restrictions on private sector contractors about how much profit they're allowed to make, among other cost control mechanisms. One such mechanism is that anyone working on DoD contracts has to charge their time to specific project codes so that they can compare your actual cost to the costs you estimated when you were awarded the contract. Well, our genius company decided that instead of only having the personnel working on these projects, which was no more than 50 people out of over 1,000, that they would make every single salary person sign a time card every week. For 95% plus of us, we charged 100% of our labor to the commercial side of the business, which was one project code, non-defense overhead or something like that. Most people just charged 8 hours per day regardless of how many hours they actually worked, because no one tracks their time down to the minute. Shortly after this happened, new state legislation went into effect requiring that all employers provide 1 hour of sick leave per 40 hours worked. Nobody paid much attention to it, but I did, because I was in a fairly specialized engineering role, with only 2 of us at the whole company, and I trained the other guy, who also happened to live overseas to support another site. This is important later. I started charging my actual hours. I noticed that despite how many hours I charged, the amount of PTO I was accruing stayed the same. This happened 3 or 4 paychecks in a row, and then I approached HR. They looked at me like I had 2 heads when I informed them they were not adjusting my PTO accruals based on hours worked, but your salary. You're paid for 40 hours regardless of how many hours you work, they told me. I explained how that didn't really apply to the situation due to the new legislation. They again looked at me like I was completely crazy. They said they'd get back to me with an answer in a week or 2. Fast forward 2 months. I'm still diligently filling out my time cards like a good little drone, and I've spoken with several of my work buddies who start doing the same. The thing about this particular group of folks was that we all traveled, internationally, oftentimes last minute, on a regular basis for work. Well, wouldn't you know it, it turns out that travel time, per our state labor laws, is considered work.